So welcome to Bible Mind, and our Eternity series today, we're going to be diving into Revelation chapter 12. So if you want to open a Bible up to there, it might be useful to you. Revelation chapter 12. At times in Revelation, John seems to have like a broad view of time. And we are very linear people, right? We think of things that in a time sequence. But God's not like that. God sees outside of time, and He sees things from the beginning to the end as though they were the same. He's just back here. He's just looking across time, and He sees it all at the same time. And we can't fathom that, right? We can't fathom being able to see. We can see the past and the present. How many of you can see the past and the present? How many of you would rather not see the past, or at least some of it? But we see all those things. So imagine, if you will, just like that, you see the past, you see the present, and you see the future, and that's how God sees things. Sometimes He allows a human to see from His perspective. And when a human sees from his perspective, sometimes the way that is translated into thought can seem a little mysterious, right? But we know that God wants us to know things, right? Revelation chapter 12 is a section of John's vision that appears to be kind of a wide-angle lens like this, where he's seeing through God's eyes and seeing the events, significant events of time in a broad spectrum, and you'll see what that means. So John's been seeing so far the step by step, and we're yet to go back into that, but we're gonna go step by step. But John's been seeing the tribulation unfold step by step, and then this is almost like an interruption in the vision where God seems to want John to get some context for what's to come after this. So he says, okay, John, step back, look at all this, now you'll understand what's coming after that. We look at the book of Revelation like it's this big mystery, right? And people try to dive in and understand and try to figure things out, right? But it's interesting that the book is not called the mystery. It's called what?
Revelation.
It's called the revelation. What's the root word of revelation? Reveal. So God's not trying to show us a mystery. He's trying to reveal to us things to come. Now we know that when we see things to come because we have a linear frame of mind, when we see things to come, sometimes we don't really fully grasp what that's going to look like till it gets here. But then we say what? We say, oh, okay, right? Just like when Jesus came, even when the disciples were walking with Jesus, how many of you catch that through Jesus' teaching, He tried to tell them what was to come, and they didn't get it? I mean, they just... He said he would, like even in Passion Week, he would say, I'm about to suffer many things. I'm going to be delivered to the Gentiles. I'm going to be crucified. I'm going to die, but I'm going to rise again. And they're just like, nobody's like, well, let's prepare for this. They're just like, okay, well, what's for dinner? And it's like they didn't. But when it happened, they understood all things, right? So God is revealing things that are to come, and we don't always understand what that looks like, how that plays out. But when it comes, people will be able to say, okay, that's what that is, right? But we're not completely in the dark even now. So let's dive into it in Revelation 12, starting with verse 1. It says, and a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and she was crying out in birth pains in the agony of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 diadems. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. Now, if you read that in the flesh, you could have one or two reactions, right? One of them can be, what? I'm going to go on to something that's easier to digest, right? Or you might say, hey, that'd make a pretty good movie. I can kind of see, Steven Spielberg directing that one or something like that. But if you look in the Spirit, you can see parallels with what's happening here. So I'm going to open the floor up, and you tell me what you see in these 6 verses. So let's start with this. At first it says, a great sign. All right? Now, we know then that this isn't just a woman, right? This is a sign. John often, when he sees this imagery, he takes it as a sign or a symbol or a type of something. And so he saw a great sign, and what he saw as the sign was a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. There's actually 3 different theories that people use, I guess depending on your perspective. And I'll tell you what the Catholic Church's perspective of this woman is. Who do you think the woman is to the Catholic Church? Okay, Mary. And so they believe that the Virgin Mary is this woman. We know that the child is clearly Jesus Christ. So that's obvious from the text. As we read on, you'll see that. But it's clearly Christ. And so they say, okay, well, if this Christ child comes from a woman, then the woman must be Mary. Genesis 3:15 records that the first prophecy of the gospel, it records the first prophecy of the gospel, and it predicts that that Satan will oppose the seed of the woman. And, it talks about, he will bruise his head, and the serpent will bruise his heel. And so that's the first prophecy that we see of the Messiah that comes. This view, however, is incorrect, because Revelation 12:1 calls the woman a sign. And John, by the way, John is the one that Mary, the mother of Jesus, lived with John throughout her life until she passed away. She lived with John. So you would think, if John is seeing this vision and the woman was supposed to be Mary, he wouldn't have just said, I saw a sign, it was a woman. He would have said, I saw a sign and it represented Mary, right? Because he was well acquainted with Mary. So I believe that the calling the woman specifically Mary is not the correct interpretation of this. Some believe that the woman is the church. And Matthew Henry's commentary, if you're familiar with that commentary, it explains that the sun is the righteousness that's bestowed upon the church by Christ, and the moon at her feet was the law of Moses. So you see the sun is brighter than the moon. So you had the law at her feet, and then the sun was the gospel or the righteousness of God. This view doesn't really line up with it would actually the 12 stars instead of what you said. The 12 stars in that scenario would be the 12 apostles. And so that's what Matthew Henry's commentary says. But the view doesn't really line up with the rest of the chapter and the events of the chapter. And really, it would put something in reverse order, because if the woman was the church, you have the church giving birth to Christ rather than Christ coming from or the church coming from Christ. So I think that we're going to have to side with a different theory than that as well, and that would be that was pointed out. Let's look at the nation of Israel. And where we see that imagery for the nation of Israel is in the story of Joseph. Joseph has a dream, right? He has a dream that the moon and the sun and the moon and 11 stars bowed down before him, and his fathers recognized what that vision meant. He said, "Oh, is that supposed to mean that your mother and I and your brothers are supposed to bow down to you?" Now, the 12th star would be who? Joseph himself, right? And so you see this picture, this imagery of the sun and the moon and the 12 stars being the origin of the nation of Israel and where Israel comes from. And as we play this out and go throughout this, you'll see how Israel is a proper interpretation of who the woman was. So she was pregnant, and she was crying out in birth pains and agony in giving birth. Moses, David, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Daniel, Malachi, Zechariah, Hosea, Micah, and Samuel all prophesied that the Messiah would come and to rule Israel. And so you have all these prophets that have prophesied the coming of the Christ, and so it was in their DNA to look for the Messiah. That just Israel, they just, every generation of Israel, they looked for the Messiah to come. And from the time that God told Abraham that he would father a nation that would bring blessing to the whole world to the time of Christ was about 2,000 years. And this 2,000 years was 2,000 years of pain and suffering for Israel, was it not? I mean, they suffered captivity and wilderness and oppression and exile. And the journey to give birth to Messiah was just 2,000 years of agony and pain. In Micah, the prophet Micah, in chapter 4, verses 9 through 10, it says, "Now why do you cry aloud? Is there no king in you? Has your counselor perished? That pain seized you like a woman in labor. Writhe and groan, O daughter of Zion, like a woman in labor. For now you shall go out from the city and dwell in the open country. You shall go to Babylon. There you shall be rescued. There the Lord will redeem you from the hand of your enemies." Now, Micah was a contemporary of Isaiah, and he prophesied this like 100 years before the captivity in Babylon. So Micah is prophesying, like many others did, of some coming persecution, some coming captivity and exile. Then in Micah 5, 2 through 4, he says this. He says, "But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah." Bethlehem was a small community outside of Jerusalem, kind of like probably the proximity of Callion to El Dorado. Okay, so just kind of think of it like that, except El Dorado being like, Little Rock, and then you have Callion. And so this was what Micah was prophesying about Bethlehem. "From you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from old, from ancient days." So the Messiah had been prophesied ever since Moses wrote Genesis. We just said earlier that Genesis was the first mention of this Messiah written down by Moses. So ever since Moses, this Messiah, this coming ruler, has been prophesied. "Therefore, he shall give them up." And so Micah's prophesying that the Lord's going to send them into captivity. He's going to send them into exile. And there's going to be a time of trouble and distress for them in the hands of their enemies, until the time when she who is in labor has given birth. "Then the rest of his brothers shall return to the people of Israel, and he shall stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they shall dwell secure, for now he shall be great to the ends of the earth." And so Micah is talking about this time coming, which wound up being about 100 years in the future, that Israel is going to experience some captivity, some persecution, some time. But even though they experience this time, there's going to be a ruler that comes. Then we get back to Revelation 12. It says, "And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his 7 on his heads 7 diadems. His tail swept down a third of the stars of the heaven and cast them to earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. We don't have to wonder who the dragon is, right? In verse 9, if we go on down, it says, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. So that part's not a mystery at all, is it? It's like, okay, we know who this is, who this character is. The 7 heads and the 10 horns represent a governmental structure of some kind. We'll talk about that in a little more detail next week. Okay? And talks about kings and kingdoms. The word diadem that he uses there's a subtlety to the word diadem. It's the word diademata in Greek, and the word comes from a Greek word meaning to bind. And so it's not like one of these big, jewel-ridden crowns, just big, glorious crowns. The Greek word for crown is Stephanos. And so it's not Stephanos. Diademata is more of like a band, like a headband. Sometimes it might have some jewels in it, but it could even be as much as a ribbon. But it denotes authority. It denotes power. So somebody wearing a diadem, they have some kind of power. They have some kind of rule. But there's a subtle difference between crown. The crown is a symbol of royalty and power, and usually worn by monarchs and rulers that have inherited their power or their crown, and it's more of a permanent nature. Whereas a diadem could be temporary. I've temporarily assigned you, this power or this authority, but it might be taken away. And there's a distinction there, and when we see the woman is wearing a Stephanos or a crown, but the beast or the dragon is wearing a diadem. And so we see that temporary power is given there, whereas there's a permanency to the woman who that would pass down to the child that she would be given birth to. It says his tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. Hold this thought. We're going to place that in a different place below. Remember, John's seeing like from here to here, right? And so he's describing this imagery. Have you ever you went to some big event and you're trying to describe that event, right? And so you may not just start here and you're just sweeping across the stadium or whatever event you're at. Sometimes you're just explaining the imagery that you see before you, right? And so picture John kind of talking like that. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. Jesus faced a lot of dangers after his birth, right? What immediately comes to mind? Herod, right? Before Jesus was 2 years old, you had Herod trying to just eliminate him by sending out a decree to kill every male child 2 years and under, just to make sure that they get him. And many times in Jesus' life, life on earth anyway, Satan tried to kill him, right? Jesus faced temptation from the devil directly tried to have him hurl himself off the pinnacle of the temple, right? So that was a temptation that failed. He had the people of Nazareth tried to throw Jesus off the cliff. You remember that story? He just walked back through the people. And then he roused the Pharisees, actually in, I believe it's John 10, tried to stone Jesus in the temple. Jesus is in the temple teaching, and they took offense at what he said. So they picked up stones right there in the temple and tried to stone him. And that failed. But then eventually Jesus was crucified. It says, she gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. So the child was born and grew to be a man, and Jesus survived all the attempts of the devil to try to devour him because it wasn't his time, right? Psalm 2, 7 through 9 says, I will tell of the decree. The Lord said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage. and the ends of the earth your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Even at crucifixion, did you know that the Romans did not crucify Christ? Did you know that the Jewish leaders, the Pharisees, did not kill Christ? Because Jesus says, what did he say? In John 10:18, he said, no one takes my life. I lay it down of my free will. And so even at that, even at the moment where we say, well, the Romans crucified Christ, or they kill, and sometimes even the church, and in the early stages of the church, once it started spreading to the Gentile church sometimes would be at odds with the Jewish people, saying, well, y'all are the ones that killed Jesus. Jesus said, nobody kills me. I lay my life down. And so that was a success of Christ and a failure of the dragon. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. And if you use the 360-day prophetic calendar that we've talked about, that would equal 3.5 years. John sees the failure of the dragon to devour Jesus, and his vision takes him kind of fast forwards to the end of time again. And we see this 1,260 days. We've talked about it in the prophecies of Daniel, right, already. And we have to see these as, because of the language used, they're meant to be talking about the same time, okay? And so the 1,260 days relates to the 42 months, or the 3.5 years, or the times, and half a time mentioned elsewhere, which is in the Great Tribulation. The last half of the 7-year tribulation is what's referred to as the Great Tribulation. We learn from Daniel that a treaty would be made with Israel for 7 years, and halfway through that 7-year period, the enemy, and we'll talk more about this next week, the Antichrist, will break that treaty, and all kind of evil will come upon the Jewish people and the saints that are left on earth at that time. And so God protects the woman from destruction, and we get a little bit more information as we read down. So let's continue with verse 7. Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And this, I'm going to insert that verse 4 at the tail end of this. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them down to earth. Like Cody was saying earlier, that this is where we see a picture of 1/3 of the angels being persuaded to follow Lucifer, or follow the devil in his rebellion against God, and they were cast down to earth. Jesus sent out 72 disciples with the gospel. And he gave them instructions that you'll heal the sick, you'll cast out devils, just like he had already sent out the 12 in a time before. Now he sends out 70 or 72, depends on the manuscript that your version comes from. And he sends them out, and they come back, and they're just really excited. They said, Jesus, we cast out demons in your name. And they just went, and Jesus wasn't really surprised by this. It says in Luke 10:17-19, the 72 returned with joy, saying, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name. And he said to them, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Behold, I have given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you. It frustrates me sometimes when people say, well, the devil's just been defeating me lately. It's like, stop it. Just don't. He's given you authority over the enemy in his name, that you don't have to stand there and take what the enemy dishes out to you. You have authority to cast him out in Jesus' name. And Jesus understands this authority that he's given them, because he said, hey, I was there when the bum tried to have a revolt. I cast that sucker out. So, that's I don't know if Jesus used those terms, but Jesus knew that he had authority when he cast Satan out of heaven altogether with all those who followed him. He knew that he had that authority, and he gave that authority to those who follow him. Isaiah 14:12 through 15, it gives us, I'm going to read you a few scriptures that give you a little more context to what we've read. Isaiah 14:12 through 15 says, "How are you fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn? How are you cut down to the ground, you who have laid the nations low? You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. Above the stars of God, I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of the assembly in the far reaches of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit." And so Isaiah sees through the Spirit and prophesies about this time of, sometime we don't really have an indication of when this happened, but we know it was before Adam and Eve's fall, right? Because the devil was doing his bad stuff at that point. So sometime before that, this event happened where there was war in heaven and the devil was cast out. Ezekiel sees a little bit of the story. In Ezekiel 28:14 through 17, it says, "You were an anointed guardian cherub. I placed you. You were on the holy mountain of God. In the midst of the stones of fire you walked. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created, till unrighteousness was found in you. In the abundance of your trade you were filled with violence in your midst, and you sinned. So I cast you as a profane thing from the mountain of God, and I destroyed you, O guardian cherub. From the midst of the stones of fire, your heart was proud because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. I cast you to the ground. I exposed you before kings to feast their eyes on you." And so Ezekiel's seeing this picture of this beautiful, we call them cherubs, okay? Do you know what a cherub is? It's not a little baby angel with little cute wings, okay? It's not that's not. If you see a picture of a cherub, or Hebrew would be cherub. If you see a picture of that, they're a hideous beast. I mean, I say hideous. I mean, frightening would be a better word. But they have like 4 heads, and they have 6 wings, and they have eyes all over their wings. And I mean, there's descriptions of these in the Bible. If I saw one, I wouldn't say, "Oh, look at the cute little angel." It's like I would fall down and be terrified, right?
The first thing they say is, "Be not afraid."
That's right, because they're afraid. You're afraid when you see one. It's like, don't be scared. And so this is what Ezekiel said that Lucifer was, this beautiful creature that God had created. God gave him power. God gave him prestige. He gave him even rule over certain things. And this went to Lucifer's head, right? Lucifer said, if I can be this powerful, I think I'll ascend above God. And he talked some angels into following him. Big mistake, right? And so it didn't end well for him. 2 Peter 2 verse 4 says, "For if God did not spare the angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains and gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment." And so we see that Peter even sees this maybe he didn't describe it as grand as Isaiah and Ezekiel, but Peter sees this time when God didn't spare these angels that had rebelled against God. In Jude Verse 6, it says, "And the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling, he has kept in eternal chains until under gloomy darkness until that the judgment of that great day." We kind of talked to this, if you can remember all the way. Let's see, this is number 20, I think, in our series, or 19. I think it's 19 in our series. So if you go back to one of the first ones, we actually talked about these scriptures. But most everyone agrees in the narrative of Satan getting cast out of heaven because of his pride, and took a third of the angels with him. Most theologians agree with that scenario. But specifically about Revelation 12, some believe that this is a different event than that. Okay, and you can read somewhere where some people think that this is really a battle that happens during the 7-year tribulation, and that it's where Satan gets his access to God completely cut off. Now, what they mean by that is we see in Job chapter 1, Zechariah chapter 3, where Satan comes before God and might accuse somebody of something or have something to say. So we see that Satan does have some access to God. And, one of the things that I want to ask God when I get to heaven is, why didn't you just thump him in the head when he came before you? Just go, and be done. It sure would have been a lot easier on me. But maybe he'll answer me, maybe he won't. But people that believe Revelation 12 is an event that happens later, they say that this is when the access to heaven by Satan is completely cut off. I believe, though, that we see in the events of 12:1 that really it's that panoramic view that John's seeing. He's seeing what happened in the past and gives him context of the things that are to come. Have you ever watched a TV show and, you're following this character and some stuff happens or whatever, and they do the flashback? Maybe they do the, or change it to black and white, or, do something that, okay, they've jumped somewhere. And they give you a backstory of this person that has some meaning to where they are now. Give some context, and then they jump back over, and it's like, oh, okay, now I understand why they're behaving this way because you showed me back here, right? And so I believe that this is what God is doing to John here. He's opening John's eyes and saying, okay, you're not going to understand this unless you know what went on. John 12:31 and 32, it says, now is the judgment of this world. Now will the ruler of this world be cast out. And I, when I am lifted up from earth, will draw all people to myself. So Satan is called the ruler of this world. Ever since the fall of man, he's had a grip on this earth, right? And he's had a grip on the people on this earth. But when Jesus was crucified, in other words, when he was lifted up, that's what that means, when I be lifted up, when I'm crucified, he broke that grip. That means he cast him out. He cast that grip off. And so anyone who believes, meaning drawn to him, can be free of that grip of the devil. Let's go on to verse 10, Revelation 12:10. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before God. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, for they loved not their own lives even unto death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil is come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. So there was war in heaven. Satan was cast out. He was cast down to earth. He pursued the woman, which was Israel, over time, trying to do away with her. He tried to stop the child, the Messiah, from being born. When Jesus was lifted up, it dealt a decisive blow to the enemy. And now he knows that his time is short. He has limited time to do what he needs to do. And I know we say, well, it's been 2,000 years, but in the scope of eternity to eternal beings, that's not a lot of time. So he knows his days are numbered. After Jesus came, died, rose, and ascended to heaven, the devil turned his attention to kill the work that Christ did by killing the Jews. He pursued the woman who gave birth to the male child. So in 70 A.D., Rome came in. They destroyed Jerusalem. They killed about 1 million Jews. Then you have, fast forward to like the 7th century, you have Islam rise. they conquer Israel. They try to exterminate the Jews at that time. In the 800 to 1000 range, you have crusaders that were coming trying to liberate Jerusalem or trying to liberate Israel because of their Christian beliefs, but yet on the way there were massacres of Jewish settlements and Jewish populations on their way to do something for Christ. In Satan set the stage for Hitler to kill over 6 million Jews in the 1940s. In 1967, the Arab nations around Israel decided we're going to do away with Israel once and for all. And so they came together to exterminate the Jews, and 6 days later they turned tail and ran. That's called the 6-Day War, and some of you were alive during that time. Even today, Israel gets attacked and brutality done upon Israel, and you have people protesting in favor of their attackers. So you see through time that the Jewish people has been under attack by the red dragon, and the Jewish people has been pursued by this red dragon over time, and we see it throughout even our lifetime. We see it unfolding. Revelation 12:14, yes sir?
Spanish Inquisition.
Revelation 12:14 says, "But the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle, so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness to the place where she is to be nourished for a time and times and a half a time." Again, that's that 3.5 year span. So being carried away with eagle's wings is a way of that we see in the Bible where God has protected His people. Flying into the reference is really a reference to how God delivered the Israelites from Egyptian slavery into the wilderness of Mount Sinai. Exodus 19:4 says, "You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself." So it's also a picture of comfort to the people of Israel, right? To hear that eagle's wings are going to carry them to safety. Isaiah 40:31 says, "But they who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall what? They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." So the devil seeks to once and for all eliminate God's chosen people, and God designs protection for them even in this 7-year tribulation where judgment is coming, and even on the people of Israel, judgment is being poured out, but God protects them as He always has. Revelation 12:15 says, "The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman to sweep her away with a flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from its mouth." Flood is often used to describe persecution. And David even uses this language like this when Saul was trying to kill him. In Psalm chapter 18, verses 4 and 16, it says, "The cords of death encompass me. The torrents," which means a flood, "of destruction assail me. He sent from on high, He took me and drew me out of many waters." And so we see even in David's psalm here that when persecution was coming upon him, he said that was like a flood, but God rescued him out of those waters. And so this is imagery that we see all the time. Satan, a.k.a. the dragon, also known as the serpent, did not give up, even though the remnant are protected. He's going to unleash all that he has, but God Himself will protect them with signs and wonders. The earth itself comes to their rescue. Revelation chapter 12, verse 17, it says, "Then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus." What do those, this is simple math. 1 plus 1 equals 2, okay? So what do these two things added together equal?
Israel and the church.
Okay? I would say Messianic Jews. Okay?
It is the rest of her offspring.
Okay? The rest of her offspring. And so we're talking about those that have survived to that point, okay? And those that keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. So what that says to me is, if we're in the 7-year tribulation, and we believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, which we've thoroughly exegeted that, then if this is happening during then this tells me that what God was trying to do has worked. His people, or at least some of them, a remnant, it calls them, a remnant has come to know that they were wrong. The Messiah did come. That Messiah was Christ. And so they have a testimony now of Jesus. And so they keep the commandments. This is the law. All right? The law and a testimony of Christ. And so you have these Messianic Jews now in this last day, and God is protecting them. It says that they'll be washed in the blood of the Lamb and testify of Christ. But many, as we see when we go through the bowl, the seals and the trumpets and the bowls, many are going to be martyred. Many are going to be killed. So the devil sets a trap, having his proxy, the Antichrist, make a treaty with Israel that will be broken halfway through the 7 years, and great persecution will ensue after that. And we'll be able to talk about that in Revelation chapter 13. The last part of that verse, it says, and he stood on the sand of the sea. Some manuscripts, now keep in mind, Revelation wasn't written in chapters, right? It's written as a complete work. So the last verse of any chapter in the Bible flows into the first verse of the next chapter. And so this is kind of like a tie verse between the two chapters. And some manuscripts read this as, and I stood. So, and he stood, he would be the dragon, right? And he stood on the sand. Or is John saying, and I stood on the sand of the sea? I think either way, we're going to see what's coming up out of the sea. I think it's significant to believe that the dragon may be there bringing this up out of the sea, or it could be John was seeing it as God was giving him this view. I don't know if I'd want to be on the sand when this thing comes up out of the sea that we'll talk about next week.